We're going into the city of Milwaukee after this worship service to go to the brewer gate. Now, as you know, the brewers are not having a real good season. And so chances are probably pretty good we're going to watch them lose the ball game. Although they've been on a little roll here. They've been on a little roll here. They've been on a little roll. But they got a rookie pitcher pitching tonight, and they probably could lose. But that's okay, because we're going to have fun anyway, whether they win or lose. Remember, guys, it's not how you play the game, you know, it's good and all that kind of stuff. But basically, we're going to the brewer game because a guy gave us tickets. Now, I offered to pay him for the tickets, but he didn't want my money. He just wanted the tickets to be used rather than go to waste. And so he said, I don't want your money, you take these tickets and go. And so in a couple hours, Bonnie and I are going to be sitting in club seats. Yeah, good seats. Seats that I would not buy if I were going to the back or going to the brewery game. And we also have preferred parking tickets too, so that's another nice thing. So really, it's a generous gift that this guy has given us. But you know something? That's the way this man is. He's generous. I've seen him be extremely generous with his family. Sometimes I think he's too generous, but that's just my opinion. And he's very generous with his neighbors. And I suspect he's also probably pretty generous with his church. Generosity, it stands out in people when you see it. In a day and age where there's just a lot of selfishness, just a lot of only for me, it's so refreshing to see a person who has this generosity about them. They're like lights in the midst of darkness. Now, just like this man, Jesus also was extremely generous. Now, it's true, Jesus didn't have a lot of money, and so he really couldn't be generous with his resources. But there were other things that Jesus was extremely generous with. His service, his time, his love, his compassion. These were things that Jesus generously gave time and time again. One day, Jesus was sitting at a well, and he was thirsty. And a woman came, and he asked her if she'd draw him some water. Now, she was a Samaritan, and Jews, like Jesus, were not to talk to Samaritans, and Samaritans were not to talk to Jews. But Jesus began a conversation with her. And if you're familiar with that story found in John, it very quickly moves to a spiritual realm and becomes apparent to Jesus that this woman was empty inside. Lacked joy, lacked hope. Let me just read you a little portion of that particular encounter and dialogue. The Samaritan woman said to Jesus, "You are a Jew and I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God, who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water." "Sir," the woman said, "you have nothing to draw with and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than the father Jacob who gave us the well?" Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water," meaning the spiritual water, "will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this kind of water so I won't get thirsty again and have to keep coming here to draw water." Now the conversation continues on, but it's a long conversation. And Jesus generously gives her his time. He generously gives her this thought about life being more than just drinking water, but quenching one's spirit with the things from heaven above. Generosity. Jesus consistently showed that. Now, just like integrity, which we talked about last week, and if you remember, integrity is doing the right thing when it's hard. That's what integrity is, doing the right thing when it's hard. And just like courage, which we talked about last week, and just like charisma, which we talked about last week, and charisma is making others feel better about themselves and their situation. Think about that for a moment. Charismatic people. What makes them charismatic? It's their ability to make other people feel better about themselves and their situation. That's what charisma is. Just like charisma and courage and integrity, generosity is also a matter of choice. People who are generous, like the guy who's giving us tickets, aren't born that way. They choose to be that way. And you don't have to have a lot to be generous. You just have to have the will. And so, just like Jesus, we too can choose to be persons of generosity. We can generously share our time. We can generously share our finances or our bags of coins. We can generously share our wisdom and our service. Generosity. Jesus showed that time and time again, and we can choose to do that as well. And when we do, we make a difference in the lives of others. Now, second quality that Jesus had, that we're talking about this morning, is resilience. Resilience. There were a lot of people that didn't like Jesus. Scribes, Pharisees, the Herodians, the Zealots. These were groups of people that didn't like Jesus and wanted him quiet. And some of those people, as we all know, wanted Jesus dead. And so every day during his ministry, he was being challenged, attacked by a person or a group of people. Every day. But yet Jesus remained resilient. He didn't quit. Resilience. It stands out in people. Like Jesus. And resilience is also a matter of choice. You and I are not born with being resilient. It's, again, something we choose to embrace. And so we can be resilient even though we're under a lot of stress at work. We can be resilient if we choose to be resilient even though there's a lot of family issues going on. We can be resilient even though there are a lot of financial issues existing in our lives. We choose to be resilient. And when we make that choice, again, people notice. And they kind of come towards us and gravitate towards us. And that then gives us the opportunity to make a difference in their life. 2 years ago, I did a book study on the book 90 Minutes in Heaven. Many of you took part in that particular study. The book is written by Reverend Don Piper. It's his personal experience. Don, if you remember, was on his way home from a clergy conference. He was on a bridge, and a semi pulled out to pass some other cars. And all of a sudden, the semi is bearing down on Don. He has no place to go because he's on a bridge, and the semi goes right over him. Crushes his car like an accordion. And Don Piper is pronounced dead at the scene. For 90 minutes, that's where the title of the book comes from, for 90 minutes his body is under a tarp waiting for the coroner and waiting for a funeral director to come and remove him from the scene. When the coroner and the funeral director come, they find a pulse. And so rather than being transported to a funeral home, he's taken to a trauma hospital. And if you read that book or if you took part in the study, you know that for the next almost 2 years, he's in the hospital. Think about that. 2 years he's in the hospital. Surgery after surgery, fighting infection after infection. Now he had some down days. Please hear that. He's human. But for the most part, what the nurses saw, what the doctors saw, what the social workers saw, what the visiting chaplain saw, what all the visitors saw was resilience on his part. Resilience. Kept his head up. Kept looking forward. He chose to be resilient. Now certainly he leaned upon God. He did a lot of praying. He read his scripture. He watched worship services on the television. So he drew close to God in many ways. And when you draw close to God in many ways, you can be resilient. And that was his experience. Resilience. When we show that kind of resilience, we too can make a difference. Because what happened was all kinds of people just started to come to visit him because they were impressed with his resilience, and they were at the end of their rope. They were thinking about quitting and giving up, but after visiting with him, hearing his life story, they too made the decision to be resilient. His resilience made a difference in their life, and our resilience can do the same. Just as Jesus' resilience made a difference in his disciples' life and countless number of followers. Now, the last quality that I want to quickly look at with you this morning is compassion. There can be no doubt that Jesus displayed compassion time and time again. Jesus showed compassion to the blind beggar. Jesus showed compassion to the demoniac living among the tombs. Compassion. Jesus displayed this time and time again. And compassion is also a choice. Please hear that. Like integrity, like courage, like generosity, compassion is a choice. One day Jesus was going into the city of Nain, when out from the city comes a funeral procession. A young boy has died. He is the only son of his mother, and his mother is a widow. The young boy is the mother's caregiver. Because she's alone, her husband has died. And so Jesus sees this, and he's moved by the sadness of this scene. Who's going to care for this woman now? She has no children. Her husband is dead. I want to read